Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Friday the 29th of September from Ukraine on day 583 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition, and then I will take a look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. The Russian President Vladimir Putin met Andrei Troshev, a former top Wagner mercenary commander, in a meeting designed to show that the Kremlin had now gained control over the mercenary group. Ukraine's emergency service reports that its workers are dealing with a fire in Kherson, which broke out at dawn after Russian shelling earlier today. TASS reports that Russian security services claim to have arrested a man in Kerch, accused of passing information to Ukrainian authorities. A Ukrainian drone dropped explosives on a substation in a Russian village close to the border in Kursk region earlier today, cutting off the power supply to a hospital, the regional governor said. The Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said today that very difficult questions would need to be answered before the EU could start membership talks with Ukraine. In comments likely to anger Kyiv, which is adamant that the territorial makeup of Ukraine is non-negotiable, Orban said, "We don't know how big the territory of this country is, as the war is still ongoing. We don't know how big its population is, as they are fleeing. To admit a country to the EU without knowing its parameters, this would be unprecedented," he said. Romania aired closer to villages across the river from Ukraine, where Russian drones have been attacking grain facilities, and is adding more military observation posts and patrols to the area. President Volodymyr Zelensky accompanied Ukraine's chief rabbi, Moshe Roiven Azman, to the Baban Yar today to pay respects on the anniversary of the Second World War massacre there. Russia's central bank has extended restrictions on transferring funds abroad for another 6 months. An official of the Russian armed forces has said that those conscripted during the autumn campaign will not be sent to fight in Ukraine. Russia said yesterday that its plans to raise defence spending by almost 70% next year, funneling massive resources into its Ukraine offensive to fight what it calls a hybrid war unleashed by the West. Belarus claimed on Thursday that a Polish helicopter had twice violated its airspace as tensions escalate between the two countries amid the conflict in Ukraine. The right of Ukrainian refugees to remain in the EU has been extended by a year to March 2025 as Russia's war against Ukraine continues, and the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said an escalating grain exports dispute between Kyiv and Warsaw was detrimental to both countries after Poland extended an ongoing grain European Commission decision to end those restrictions. Household energy bill climbed to an average of almost £1,900 a year in the coldest months of the year under the government's energy price cap, according to a leading forecaster. The energy price cap is expected to climb from an average of £1,834 a year set effect to just £1,898 for the months of January to March, according to analysts at Cornwall Insight, in a blow to households hit by the cost of crisis. The energy price cap sets the maximum price that suppliers charge based on the typical gas and electricity bill. Will push bills higher if households need to keep the heating on longer. The cap remains more than 50% higher than pre-pandemic levels. The latest energy bill forecast follows calls from more than 140 organisations, individuals, including the consumer champion Martin Lewis, to help Britain's least well-off households with a social tariff for their gas and electricity. The forecast increase effectively wipes out the modest drop for the energy price cap due to come in from the 1st of October, but fuel poverty campaigners warned that even the small decrease was unlikely to ease the financial burden for the most vulnerable households. Responding to energy, household bills are set to be 13% higher this winter than they were last year. The SNP has repeated their call for the UK government to restore the £400 energy rebate. The SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn MP, has previously written to Keir Starmer regarding Westminster's cost of living crisis, calling on the Labour leader to back his calls for the reintroduction of the energy bill rebate for households this autumn and winter. However, the Labour leader failed to respond to the letter. Commenting, the SNP's energy security spokesperson, Dave Duggan MP, said, "Working families have been squeezed throughout this Westminster cost of living crisis, with many people still in debt from last winter's energy bills. Damaging Tory and Labour Party policies like Brexit and austerity have hammered household incomes. It is now vital that the UK delivers urgent support by reintroducing a £400 energy bill rebate for all households from October." The SNP is the only party truly committed to tackling poverty and the cost of living crisis, delivering progressive policies like the Scottish Child Payment and the Best Start grants. In contrast, the Tories and pro-Brexit Labour are taking money away and leaving families in the cold. He went on, "At the next general election, voting SNP is the only way to secure real change with independent and real health cost of." The Instill Studies has warned that UK households are facing an average tax rise of £3,500 a year by the next election. That's the biggest increase over a Parliament record dating back more than a year. The IFS said that on current forecasts, the Conservatives were on track to raise £100 billion more annually by 2024 than if taxes as a share of national income 2019. In a damaging report for Rishi Sunak, as the Tory party faces growing internal divisions over the issue, the think tank said tax revenue was on track to amount to about 37% of national income in 2024, from about 33% 4 years ago. Compared with a world in which that shift had not occurred, the IFS said this amounted to additional £1 billion for the Exchequer, the equivalent to about £3,000 per household, although some would pay more and some others less. With less than 2 months before the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, gives the autumn statement, the Prime Minister is likely to have little room for cuts if he wants to meet the government's self-imposed targets for the public finances without renewed cuts to public spending. Labour have caught themselves in the same bind as they try to demonstrate economic competence before the next election in the hope of winning over Tory voters. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves introducing a wealth tax or putting up the top rate of income tax. So the Labour has a series of commitments aimed at ending the two-child cap and rape clause. Separate research published today by the Resolution Foundation and innovation charity Nesta's UK 2040 Options Programme warned stark wealth inequalities were holding Britain back. The report, which argued that changes to wealth tax were a no-brainer, found total wealth for the richest 10% of people in the UK had grown 25 times faster than for the poorest 30% between 2006 and 2020. Governments claim that increasing numbers of asylum seekers because for asylum has been lowered does not apply in the UK under guidance in her own department, lawyers have said. In a controversial speech done America since the Refugee Convention 1951, what were akin to a definition of discrimination. People who may qualify for asylum, including gay people and women fearing discrimination. However, immigration lawyers have pointed out that Home Office guidance to caseworkers says that asylum seekers must demonstrate whether the claimant does fear persecution. A document entitled Assessing Credibility in Refugee Status, which advises caseworkers since the Nationality and Borders Act came into force last year, says the decision-maker must determine if it is more likely than not that the claimant has a characteristic which would cause them to fear persecution for one or more of the Convention reasons: race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, and that they do in fact fear persecution. Enver Solomon, the chief executive of the Refugee Council, said it is alarming that speculative claims can be made by the Home Secretary, appearing to question the standard her department's asylum making, but ever support them. Ofcom's chief executive has said there is nothing under current rules to stop GB News using the Conservative MP Lee Anderson to interview the Conservative Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Melanie Dawes said she did not want to prejudge the interview, which will be broadcast tonight, in a show on the right-wing GB News channel. He trailed the interview with his Conservative parliamentary colleague as an exclusive scoop, and her first interview on British soil since her landmark speech this week in the US. The Broadcasting Code, which Ofcom enforces, states no politician may be used as a newsreader, interviewer, or reporter in any news programmes unless, exceptionally, it is editorially justified. Ofcom's rules draw a distinction between news and broadcasting, enabling politicians to host programming that potentially produces news as long as not adult of a news bulletin. Last week, Ofcom found that GB News broke impartiality when the Fife Tory MPs Esther McVey and Phyllis interviewed Chancellor Jeremy Hunt in March, which was because they failed to include a wide enough range of viewpoints rather than because of the choice of hosts. Ofcom is under substantial pressure over its approach to GB News, which is the subject of 12 separate investigations for potential breaches of the Broadcasting Code. On Thursday, the reg launched a fresh investigation into the misogynistic comments made by presenter Lawrence Fox on Dan Wootton's GB News show, which have led Rishi Sunak has expressed total support for Anderson's joint roles, as 52 people have been killed and more than 50 injured in a suicide attack near a mosque, police have said. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the blast, which comes amid a surge in the number of attacks by militant groups in the west of the country before national elections for January next year. The bomber detonated himself near the vehicle of the Deputy Superintendent of Police, the Deputy Inspector General of Police Munir Ahmed told reporters. The Pakistani Taliban, an umbrella group of various hardline Sunni Islamist groups, denied it had carried out the attack. The casualties were being treated at hospitals in Mastung near Quetta. A senior police officer, Mohammed Nawaz, was among the dead, a government administrator, Atta Ullah, said. Authorities had asked police to be on maximum alert to the risk of militants targeting gatherings to celebrate Maulid an-Nabi, which involves day-long celebrations and tribunals. In a statement, the caretaker Interior Minister, Sarfraz Bukti, denouncing the bomb and expressed sorrow over the deaths, had declared a national holiday for Maulid an-Nabi, and President Arif Alvi and the caretaker Prime Minister Anwarul Kar used separate messages to call for unity and for people to adhere to the teachings of Islam's prophet. Questioning witnesses in the first hearing staged by House Republicans, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez prompted each to say they were not presenting hand witness crimes against Joe Biden. Democrats accused Republicans of fabricating supporting evidence of corruption involving the president and his surviving son, Hunter Biden. Republicans on the House overseek witness. Democrats won. Jonathan, a law professor at Georgia University and well-known conservative commentator, she said, "In your today, are you presenting any first-hand witness account of crimes committed by the President of the United States?" "No, I'm not," said Turley, who had already made headlines by saying he did not believe that the current evidence would support articles of impeachment. Ocasio-Cortez asked the same question of Eileen O'Connor, a former Assistant Attorney General in the Justice and Tax Division who worked for Donald Trump's transition team and is also a member of the right-wing Federalist Society. "No, I'm not," said O'Connor. Ocasio-Cortez then Bruce Dubinsky, a forensic accountant. "As the third and final Republican witness in this hearing, have you, in your testimony, presented any first-hand witness account of crimes committed by the President of the United States?" "I have not," he replied. Ocasio-Cortez said she would assume the same of the sole witness called by the Democrats, Michael J. Gerhardt, a University of North Carolina law professor. He replied, "I'm not a fact witness." Correct. Turning to an item of actual evidence produced by Republicans, AOC accused them of making it up. Referring to Byron Donald, who had shown text messages he claimed indicated that Hunter Biden engaged in fraud and money laundering to the benefit of his father, Ocasio-Cortez said, "Earlier today, one of our colleagues, the gentleman from Florida, presented up on the screen something that appeared to be a screenshot of a text message containing or insinuating an explosive allegation." She continued, "That screenshot of what appeared to be a text message was a fabricated image." She added, "What was brought out from the fabricated image excluded critical context that changed the underlying meaning and allegation that was presented on the screen by this committee, members of this committee." Ocasio-Cortez then pointed out that the only witnesses in the hearing were under oath and therefore bound to truth. In contrast, members of Congress could say whatever they wanted. Remaining in the US, Joe Biden dramatically raised the ante in the forthcoming presidential election campaign yesterday with a stark and impassioned warning that American democracy is imperiled by a vengeful Donald Trump, his likely opponent next year. The US president used his speech to stir his supporters and mate undecided voters by spelling dangers a second Trump would pose his status as the beacon Democrat government. Putting US history at an inflection point, President Biden said the country's character and future was threatened by the authoritarian values of Trump's self-styled MAGA movement. Speaking to an audience in Phoenix, Arizona, he said, "There's something dangerous happening in America. There is an extremist movement that does not share the same beliefs of our democracy, the MAGA movement. History has brought us to a new time of testing. All of us are being asked right now, what will we do to maintain our democracy?" President Biden invoked the late John McCain, a former reporter, a close for between democratic norms and traditions with conduct that appeared to characterize his predecessor. "Democracy," he said, "means rule of the people, not rule of the monarchy, not rule of the money, not rule of the mighty. Regardless of the party, that means free and fair elections, respecting the outcome, win or lose. It means you cannot love your country only when you win. Democracy means rejecting and repudiating political violence. Regardless of party, such violence is never, never, never acceptable in America. It's undemocratic, must never be normalized to gain political power." The last comments were a clear reference to the January 6th attack on Capitol Hill by a Trump-inspired mob trying to stop the ratification of Biden's presidential election victory by the US Congress. President Biden warned that the danger had not passed. It's still at risk. This is not hyperbole, it's a simple truth. Biden said that the threat of violence continued, pointing to threats aimed at General Mark Milley, the chair of the US Armed Forces Joint Chiefs of Staff, who had been accused of treason by Trump. Frankly, these MAGA extremists memory of John McCain, who died in 2018. McCain had been a Republican president, was a frequent critic of Trump. Supporting farmers and crofters to produce food more sustainably, government supports farming and food production, its efficiency and profitability of the sector. The draft legislation has been designed to provide an adaptive support framework for farmers and crofters that can respond to future social, economic and environmental changes. The bill to Parliament is a significant milestone in reforming the support systems that will empower Scotland's farmers and crofters to cut climate emissions and restore nature, helping us achieve that vision. I understand that the sector needs flexibility now and in the future to respond to the pressures and challenges that we will face. As we move forward, our bill will allow for adaptive support for farmers, crofters and land managers in the near, medium and long-term future. We will take the necessary time to develop the detail of our head of the University of Edinburgh School of Music, based at Edinburgh College of Art, Dr. Martin Park connects with some of the biggest issues facing the world today, from climate change and mental health to the sounds of protest and community action of the UNESCO Week of Sound. here in Edinburgh. The Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture, Angus Robertson MSP, welcomed the news that the UNESCO Week of Sound will be held in the Scottish capital, saying, "I'm delighted to welcome the UNESCO Week of Sound to Edinburgh, the first city in the UK from monuments. Please look after yourselves